because family is such a theme throughout this book, um, how did you, I guess, with that scene, like that part of the book specifically, like, how did you get that so right?
Uh, a, a lot of work, a lot of soul searching, spending a lot of time with these characters in my head kind of helps too. Um, there were definitely moments of inspiration where, Sarah will just whisper in my head the way he always has and say, no, this is what it is, and this is how uh, this plays out. Because he's done that to me from the start. I don't know if I've ever told you about where this whole series came from.
Not that I recall.
So I was at work shelving some books, and suddenly this person just pops into my head, this character, and says, "Hi, this is my name." And he just had this full presence, this very alluring, very magnetic aura about him that just immediately grabbed my attention. And I really wanted to know who he was and what he was all about. But he said, no, I'm not going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you about all these other people. So that's another reason why from the start, it's always been a different person, different protagonist in each book, because these are how I got to know him. And so we're seeing his life and the events that he's at the center of through all these other people. Because that's just how he is. He their lives are more important than his. Kind of selflessness, and so he still does that to me. He will pop in my head while I'm writing a scene and say, we're going to go this way. This is how it actually happens. This is what the real crux of their situation is and what they actually need.
So interesting. Um, you are not the first author that I've either spoken with or followed on social media or whatever, who has described things like that, where the characters come to life and speak to you, and kind of tell you where things are going to go and how to develop things, and that sometimes things don't go how you might expect. I feel like, I mean, I don't think every author experiences that. Maybe they do. I don't know. Um,
It depends on the author, and for me, it depends on the character in the series. Most of my characters are very laid back, and they'll do whatever I tell them to do. But he's the one exception where he's very quietly saying, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this other thing instead, because that's how it happened.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I was sitting there kind of pondering as you were saying that. I was like, well, now what does that mean? Like, can I expand that into, like, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to put it into words. Um, is that like a hallmark of a certain type of author or a certain quality of author? But I feel like that would be kind of too, I don't want to say stereotyping, but um, like categorizing too much. Like art, writing, what, uh, drawing, painting, like there's so many ways to do it. There's so many different aspects, so many different people, and everyone has their own way of doing it. I think it's kind of hard to categorize and say, oh, when you can do this, that's a hallmark of knowing, you do your craft well or whatever.
Yeah, I've heard some authors say that they know a character well enough to write them once they can go Christmas shopping and buy gifts for them. And, I know people who religiously fill out the character sheets where they have the name, birth date, blood type, and the whole anime character bios. And then there are people like me that are just like, I'll make it up as I go along. I know their backstory, I know their name, and what they look like. We're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you are more of a planner or more of a pantser, and what kind of author you are, because I always found that interesting as well.
I'm very much a planner. In fact, if I pan this over, that is the outline for my current book right there on the corkboard. But I still leave myself room to make things up off the fly, because I know that once I get it's usually about halfway into a novel where some great idea will come to me, some great plot twist that will completely change the back half of the book. So then I grumble and whine as I spend the next week readjusting all of my well-plotted chapters, but it's always better for it. And I have to be, hip deep in a book in order to see it. I'm not going to see it from the very start. So there's always a certain percentage that's made up on the fly, because it just has to be. There's no way for me to foresee what it's going to become.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like with the things I have planned to write, like I kind of know some of the major story beats, but how I get from one beat to the next, like from waypoint C to D to Q to R, back to N or whatever, order we're going in. Um, how you get from one point to the other, that I have no idea, but I kind of know the main beats along the path. But I'm sure those might change down the road too. Um, so since you, I'm going to go ahead and ask this, especially since your current series is dealing with the Greek mythos. Um, how much of a role would you say your muse plays in your writing? If you would, identify having one or use that term.
Don't identify as having a muse, because inspiration comes from everywhere for me, and I'm not one of those writers that has to be in the mood to write. I just need the time and the pain relievers. Arthritis is not a disease that writers want.
No, no.
uh, but because when I was writing the first draft of uh, Moonflower, the first Oneiroi War book, I was writing during my lunch breaks at the store. So, I've got a sandwich in one hand and I'm typing with the other in my 30-minute lunch break. And, I don't have the time to wait an hour for my muse to show up and inspire me into what is going to happen next. It's one of the reasons why I'm an outliner, because I can look at my outline and go, okay, I'm right here, and this is the rest of what needs to happen in this chapter, and I'm off. And so within 5 minutes, my brain's already in the scene and I'm going. So I've just kind of trained myself to do that. So I don't need to rely on a muse. uh, the story itself, I guess you could say, is enough inspiration for me.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, yeah, I think for me, like I claim a muse, um, but she's more for my poetry than my prose. My prose, I think, is more definitely not that I am very disciplined in sitting down and writing very often, and I need to get better at that. But yeah, I can see where the planning is super important there. I think in some ways, and I don't want to claim a muse for this, but I actually, um, several of like the plot points and things in some of the stories I have planned, come from different sources of inspiration, dreams I've had or, experiences or things like that. And so, I don't know, for me, like, I feel like if I can start in one of those points and keep writing from there, like, kind of feel like I'm blending the inspiration with the dedication that comes. But like I said, I'm not so good with the dedication of sitting down and writing, and a lot of my writing turns into time for writing for my blog and things like that. So how do you um, how do you budget your time? How do you make everything work? Because I know you're super busy with work at the bookstore. You've got other things going on in life. Um, how do you make it all work?
It's a juggling act. It definitely is. I try to clear my schedule as much as possible. If I don't have to do it, then I don't, kind of thing. Whereas, as much as I love hanging out with my friends, that's time that I could also be spending writing. So unless it's a special occasion or if I'm going to be in their area and just really feel a need to sit and chat, then I just don't. I'll check in with them on social media, say hi, quick 5-minute chat, but save myself the 20-minute or in some cases hour-long drive to go see them. Also, prep meals a lot. I've discovered that cooking every night takes a lot of my remaining time and energy when I come home from work. So I'll just make big batches of things at the beginning of the week. In fact, that's what I'm going to be doing this afternoon, so that I can just heat and eat something quick, sit down and write and pound out some words before I am too exhausted to even form a coherent sentence. There are days when I'm just going to be too tired and in too much pain. And so I give myself some leeway. It's like, okay, I'm wiped out, so I'm just not going to uh, write tonight. This past year was the first year I didn't do NaNoWriMo because I knew with the extra stress of COVID and the holiday rush that I just was not going to have enough spoons to work on a manuscript. And it was nice having that break and that time to just relax and focus on my health. So now that the rush is over, I can dive back in refreshed. So it's just learning what I need to do to clear the time that I need, give myself the preparation that I need so that I've got everything set up and ready to go.
That makes sense. And I love spoon theory, by the way. That's a great way to convey to people um, kind of where you're at mentally and emotionally. Um, for those who are not familiar with spoon theory, would you like to give like a brief summary of what that is?
It's a way of explaining chronic pain to those who don't suffer from it. Uh, and the theory is that, you start the day with, say, a dozen spoons, and everything you do during the day costs a certain number of spoons. And when you're out, that's when you need to go to bed and just rest. Because if you don't, if you try to push through and do the rest of your tasks for the day, you're using tomorrow's spoons and you're going to be in even more pain and a lot more exhausted than you really should be, and a lot more than is good for you, because then it takes even longer to recuperate and bounce back. So, and it doesn't seem like writing would take a lot of spoons, but it does, because you're doing a lot of, it takes a lot of concentration. So even though it's not physically taxing, it it's mentally taxing. And
Mm-hmm.
if you've got a mentally taxing job, that makes writing even harder. I've learned that if I've had to take a lot of NSAID painkillers, that numbs me mentally and makes me what was the word? Less empathetic towards my characters. And so when I go back a couple days later and reread what I wrote on those high pain days, there's no emotion in it at all. So I've learned the hard way that if I'm going to be doing any sort of writing, it's going to require a lot of work later on a less pain or a lower pain day, so I can add back in all of that emotional connection that the scenes need. Or I if just can't write if I've had to take more than 4 pills.
That's really interesting. Thank you. That was a great definition and description of spoon theory, and I like how you tied that into your self-awareness of your writing and how it affects your writing, and your ability to be empathetic. I think that's some great self-awareness. I think that it reminded me, I think I have read some studies, or at least articles about studies. I'll be honest, I don't read a lot of studies, um, but
I do.
articles about what you do.
Yes.
I applaud you for that. Um,
European medical journals are the best.
okay, why do you like the European ones specifically?
In Europe, they're doing a lot more studies about arthritis and for curative methods than what is being done in the US. In US, it's more palliative, it's more early diagnosis or pain management, especially for osteoarthritis, which is what I have. So I find more useful information of new techniques and treatments that I may have to become an expat to get. Uh, and plus, the medical journals in Europe seem to be a lot more forthcoming with details. Like the US journals, they'll just say, okay, this is the gist of what we did and the gist of our results. But the European journals, they'll break it down. It's like, okay, we did this dose and this amount of time, and here's everything. I mean, they'll give you the full data in a lot of cases.
Interesting. For some reason, I'm not surprised to hear that. But that's interesting to know that there is that difference between American and European medical journals. Um, I feel like, I read an article that was summarizing a journal article, a couple of years ago that actually did talk about, um, NSAID medication and how it affects, um, empathy or something like that. Like it was, that sounded familiar as you were saying that, but I don't have
Yeah,
like
there have
an
been studies done on it. Yeah, I can't
interesting.
remember which article or which journal talked about it, but I do remember reading about that study. So,
And that's something that we don't really hear about. Or we don't know about, the average person, because they don't usually have the time or take the time to research, and it's not really in the, um, when your doctor or your pharmacist sits down with you and talks with you about a medication, that's not really in what they talk about.
mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure if it's in the monographs. I don't think it is. Um, I haven't spent a lot of time reading those, monographs or the packaging inserts or whatever you want to call them. But in my previous career, at my former employer, I spent a bit of time, um, coordinating medications for group home residents, coordinating between the group home, the pharmacy, and the doctor's office. And so I learned a lot about medications during my time doing that. And I don't really remember seeing that on any paperwork for any of those medications.
Yeah, I haven't either. I mean, they're more concerned with, can they operate heavy machinery, and is this going to interact with their blood pressure medication?
Yeah, yeah. In other words, is this going to kill you or is it going to keep you from working?
Mm-hmm. It's like you're
Not it.
mentally numb, but you can still work. You're good.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to me how in American society compared to a lot of other societies, we're a lot more individualistic, and yet there's so much more. There's in some ways less information. There's less awareness, less focus on really what makes a person whole and healthy, and largely we're missing kind of that whole holistic aspect to medicine, and not just medicine but wellness in general.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there should be more of that in a society that's so focused on the individual. I don't know. Something to think about, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to be said for holistic medicine and holistic methods. I find a lot of times if I have writer's block, if I can just get outside and go for a walk, get some fresh air, and get my mind off of onto something else, even if it's just listening to music and letting the music distract me. Those knots, proverbial knots in my head, will just kind of unravel themselves, and after about an hour when I get back, it'll all make sense, and I'll see, okay, this is why I'm having problems with this. This is what I need to do to fix it, and I can move on now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
I mean, getting that little bit of exercise and the blood flowing, there's so much to be said for non-traditional fixes, I guess.
Yeah, just simple things like moving your body, being hydrated, sunshine, a hug,
Hmm.
whatever the case may be. Yeah, yeah. There's definitely not as much of an awareness about those things as there should be, I think. So, um, so you were talking about the days that you are too tired to write or hurting too much to write. Um, I know for me, like if I'm having those days where I'm super tired or I'm not feeling well, whatever the case may be, um, I'm never as productive as I should be during the day. I never get as much done as I want to, but I also feel like guilt if I don't, which I feel like is a very American thing too.
Hmm.
But um, like on those days where I'm not just I don't have enough spoons, if you will, and I'm not someone who suffers from chronic pain, but that spoon theory has been adopted by others, but and just it's a good way to explain things for people in general. I feel so we've appropriated that from the chronic pain community, if that's a term. But I'm rambling, so I will focus in here. Those days where I'm feeling that way, I will um, do something to where I feel like, okay, I'm at least doing something productive in the sense that I'm researching, and I use that term loosely to be honest. But there are one of the two series that I have in mind that I've been working on is more of an urban fantasy kind of paranormal sort of series. And so I can sit down and watch an episode of a show that deals with ghosts or something paranormal, and I enjoy watching that show, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, this person said sparked an idea here that triggers this thought, and I can turn that into like a concept, or a character trait, or it's something I can use um, in my story. And so I feel like, and maybe I'm just giving myself excuses or something, but I feel like that way at least I'm being productive by doing research. Um, so I was wondering, like, and don't feel bad if you don't, but like that's not my point. But like on those days, like, is there? Do you ever feel? I guess is what I'm asking. Do you ever feel that like you're not being productive enough, and so is there something that you do that isn't writing, but that you still can feel like you're being productive and um, on task, so to speak, with moving forward with your project?
I definitely feel that guilt all the time. It's taken me a long time to get to a place where I am comfortable prioritizing my health and saying, look, the writing just isn't going to happen. Sorry, fans, it's not happening tonight. Uh, because, when it all comes down to it, I'm the only one who can do this, who can write this story this way. And so if I don't take care of myself, it's never going to happen. And so, take it easy a few nights when I need to rest, so I have the strength and focus that I need to finish the novels. That's then my bigger priority. Uh, but on those nights when I can't write, yes, sometimes I will watch documentaries or YouTube videos that have something to do with what I'm writing about, so that it is still research. Sometimes I'll just watch some anime that has nothing to do with the book, because I'm still consuming narrative. I'm still learning something about storytelling or about character development, or even watching uh, uh, martial arts tutorials and saying, tucking away things for fight scenes
Yeah.
later. Any type of media input or books that I read by some of my other favorite authors, it's all teaching me something, so that I'm slowly moving forward and becoming a better writer and a better artist myself while I'm resting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Podcasts are another thing that I'll do. I especially um, will listen to the Writing Excuses podcast. That's one
I
of my
love that
favorites.
podcast. So good.
It's a good one. I'll listen to that for different tips, and just I love they've got their three recurring hosts per episode, and it's different hosts every episode, but they've got I don't know, a stable of like probably 8 people that they rotate through as hosts. And
Oh, it's a lot more than that now.
oh, is it? And
Yeah.
then they have the guest, who's essentially a host as well,
Mm-hmm.
but it's someone who's not a regular host. And the four of them talking, and it's always interesting to hear the different perspectives that they have, and um, especially considering the personalities of the hosts there. Just they're very different, very interesting people.
They are, but they're so much fun to hang out with.
I bet they are. I haven't had much opportunity to do that. I did go with you to the book signing one time for Brandon Sanderson, and there was gosh, I feel like it was like 20 of us that went out for like snacks afterwards, like to some restaurant. I don't even remember where it was, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to say there was like 20 of us that went out. So that's been like my in-person experience with with any of those people. But um, yeah, Brandon was great. The very little interaction that I had with him, and I feel like all of them are just amazing people.
They really are. They've been great mentors to me. I love them so much.
I can see that. I uh, yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I do my writing, and then Life Living Pursuit of Happiness project. That's kind of my business, entrepreneurially, that I'm building, and I use some writing for that. But in a way, the two are kind of separate. But there's a lot more mentors out there, I think, in kind of the entrepreneur business space than there are in the writing space. I feel like even kind of what I call like the long distance mentor, like people putting out podcasts or YouTube videos or whatever that you may not know or even spend time with personally, like in person, but you're still getting kind of some general advice and suggestions and learning tricks and tips from them. And I feel like there aren't as many out there in the writing space that do that. Maybe I'm just not
They're
exposed to the right people, but
we're not as public about it as we are in the entrepreneurial circles. It's kind of one of those, you have to know someone who's involved or be in the right writer circles to see the announcements come up. Because the Clarion workshops uh, are a great series. I have friends who've gone to those a number of times. I've I'm an alumni of the Superstars Writing Seminar, which covers both the craft side and the business side of the industry, and we've got a lot of great instructors and mentors in there. Um, but outside of the workshop circuits, there's a lot of great mentors who just do it on the side, and it's just a matter of befriending uh, these authors, asking for their help, uh, giving them your email address, and just going from there. And that's what most of my uh, mentors have come from, is just going to signings uh, back when we could still do signings. Uh, and
hopefully
yeah,
again
just,
someday soon.
yeah, hope someday. Um, but just putting myself out there and saying, hey, I'm a new writer. I really like your work. I'd like to talk about your work. Can we have dinner or go out for drinks after the event? And a lot of times they say yes. And so I've built a lot of relationships with some really great, talented people that I admire, and they've been a big help. In fact, at Superstars last year, uh, I spent a good amount of time talking with Dan Wells and getting some one-on-one help from him about how I'm going to handle certain aspects of the rest of the Oneiroi War that I couldn't quite figure out on my own. And he was a huge help with that. He doesn't feel like he was a huge help, but he really is.
That's awesome. So who? So Dan Wells, you just mentioned. I know you have a little bit of a mentor-mentee relationship with. It seems like you do. I could be assuming too much. With Brandon Sanderson, um, who who else might you say has been kind of a mentor figure for you?
Mary Robinette Kowal, definitely. In fact, she was kind enough to take me under her wing when she lived in Portland and introduced me to a lot of people in the industry. So a lot of people who later became mentors, or even my cover artist, whose work is sitting over my shoulder. uh, I met him through her. And so, yeah, she's been a huge help in many ways. Um, Diana Farrah Francis, has helped me work through a number of plot problems. Joshua Esso, he's a professional editor, works freelance, and he was a big help in helping me get my current novel, the one that's behind me, get that plot straightened out. Because this one is literature, it's historical fiction, and it's not in my comfort zone. And so it definitely helped a lot having a more experienced person in that genre looking at it and say, okay, I see what you're trying to do. Let's go this direction. Here's how you want to set yourself up for this. Trying to think who else. Ken Scholes has been a big help. The dearly departed Jay Lake and John Pitts.
Mm-hmm. Cool. It sounds like you've had a lot of different help and influence there from a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And it's a list that grows.
Mm-hmm.
Like Joshua, I just contacted about 4 months ago when I realized I needed help with this book. So it's just one of those things that, as you network and meet people in your industry of choice, and you just develop those relationships, not knowing whether they're going to be kind of a future linchpin in your career or not. There's a number of people who I met and just became friends with over the years, who later then became editors who bought stories from me. So it's just kind of one of those things. One of my future novels may end up turning another one of my friends into a mentor. So it just happens.
Nice.